this day, and as photographers are often apt to do, began conversing with the children. And one of the questions that they would ask frequently is, what are you going to be whenever you grow up? And one child gave probably the best answer when they said, tired. Because that's what they see. I read a while back an article that was describing a store that opened in the Mall of America back in 2005. And it was called Minneapolis. For 70 cents an hour, you could come into this store where you're surrounded by all the hustle and bustle. You could come into this store and they had rooms that were themed, like Asian mist. And then the walls were thick enough that they could drown out the noise of all the children playing around outside in the mall. And you'd go in for 70 cents an hour and you could pay to take a nap. You laugh. But the reality is that we are so tired. I see that every single week. Because I give you at least a 30-minute nap every single week to watch how tired you are. And I've observed as globally the energy drink market, it has increased from 1999, it was a $3.8 billion market, to in 2014 it was $27.5 billion. That's over a 600% increase. And America is the worst. In the United States alone, sales have grown by more than 5,000% since 1999. And I don't think that includes what most of your energy drink of choice is, coffee. That's just what is being marketed as an energy drink. And we overwork ourselves. And we run out of energy. We think that we can just take this supplement, we can do this, and we can have a power nap, and we can cram more into our days. But what if the reason that we are so tired is because we are made to rest? So turn with me in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 2 as we are looking at the creation story of the Bible as it reveals how we are made and why we are made, the purpose with which we are made. Genesis 2 describes the seventh day. Starting in verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array by the seventh day. God had finished the work He had been doing, so on the seventh day He rested from all His work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. But why did God rest on the seventh day? It's not as if God needed to rest. It wasn't like He had exhausted Himself and He was tired and He needed a break. Because as most of you maybe are familiar with Isaiah chapter 40, verse 28, this verse that many of us kind of latch onto for hope. It says, do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary. Even young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. The Lord is the everlasting God. He will not grow faint. He will not be exhausted. He is not capable of that. So why does God rest? The word rest in Genesis 2 is the root word for Sabbath. It means to cease or to stop. God ceased. God stopped His creative work because the creative work was done. And so He ceased creating. It was done. The work was completed. There was nothing left to do. And we see on the seventh day, the goal, the culmination of creation is rest. scholar points out that humanity, the creation of human beings, may be the climax of creation, but the goal of creation is the seventh day. It's rest. I think that's why you find so much creation language in a book like Revelation that describes the goal of all of the restoration, that it's all moving towards this time when creation is restored. And so you have the garden restored back in the end of time. And God is living in intimacy with His people once again. And there is this Hebrew concept of shalom. And it's a misnomer to think that word just simply means peace. It's not just a greeting, but it encapsulates so much more than that. It encapsulates wholeness, completeness, perfection. And so that is what existed in the garden, this shalom. The goal had been completed, and God ceased His work. He rested. So whenever God is calling together His people, the people that He would give a special name, that they would be His people and He would be their God, He gives this command in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, or any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But He rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. It's as if all of the days of the week are made to flow into the seventh day. It's all pointing to this seventh day, the day of the Lord, the day of rest. And God, whenever He's setting up His people, He gives them instructions, and He places this as one of the Big Ten. One of the Big Ten Commandments was that they were to rest. And everybody in their land was to rest. It wasn't just the people who claimed a nationality of being an Israelite, but all who lived in that land. They were to make sure that they rested. And it was such an important thing that he lays down the consequence, the punishment of death if you fail to observe these commands. Such a countercultural idea. It's countercultural even today. To rest. Thinking of Chick-fil-A. A wildly successful fast food chain that, because its founder was a believer in Jesus Christ, he was committed not to working on the Sunday, the Lord's Day. And so he refused to open up his restaurant on that day in order to provide not only his family, but all of the families that would work at that restaurant an opportunity to go and worship. And it was not a popular idea, and it's still not a popular idea. He's living in a radically countercultural way, and yet he is successful. By closing business on a day that is a big business day for fast food restaurants. There are two reasons that rest is important for us. The first reason is that rest is a way that we celebrate our freedom. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, as God is giving the instruction to take a day of rest for this new nation, He says, verse 15, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. The instruction to rest is tied to remembering that you once were slaves. That your story has within it that you lived as slaves in which you did not have a choice in what you did and when you did it. You had somebody that told you what to do and how to work. And one of God's primary concerns in setting up this new nation is that they would carry with them all of the values of the world in which they lived. And then whenever they got to the promised land, that they would see that there are people, that they're harvesting the fields here, and they're succeeding. And so they would start to learn farming practices from those people. And God says, I want you to remember that whenever you rest, you are celebrating your freedom. Which bears the question, is my life shaped more by the culture that I live in than the God whose image I'm created in? Because it's very easy to live in this culture and to have our schedule and our lives shaped by the culture in which we live and not make decisions based on the God in whose image we're created in. Romans 12, verse 2, Paul says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Part of the call that is placed on those who are following Jesus Christ is not to be conformed to the culture in which you live, but to be transformed into the image of the Creator. It's not easy to do. And one of the greatest problems with religion today is that we have just changed the words, but we live under the same value system. And so we will go out into the world and we'll tell them how they are being a slave to the world and how sin is enslaving them and that Jesus can free them. And immediately what we do is we hand them a checklist of all the things that they have to do in order to have this salvation. And all the checklist of what they have to continue to do in order to maintain their salvation. And what we are doing is just changing the words, but it's the same value system. That you are still a slave. You're really not free. That you still have to work your way up the system. And if you're good enough, if you work hard enough, if you achieve enough success, then you can be at the top of the ladder. And at the top of the ladder, God will be pleased with you. But this flies in the face of what Jesus came to offer and to teach. That there is nothing that you can do to earn salvation. There is nothing that you can do that can maintain your salvation. Salvation is totally, wholly, and completely dependent upon God's grace. There is nothing that you can do to add to that. And if that's starting to make some of you a little bit uncomfortable and starting to think that we really tell people that Jesus just frees you completely, that you don't have to do anything. If you're concerned that that's going to give them a license to do anything that they want, then good. Then I'm finally starting to preach the grace of God the way that the Bible preaches the grace of God. Because every time Paul preaches the grace of God, there is somebody that comes along and says, now wait a minute. And he has to continue to teach them. And So we'll say in places like Romans that just because grace exists doesn't mean that we can sin more and more. But whenever we rest, we celebrate that we are free. That we are free. We don't have to live under the hero system of this world anymore that says that you have to have a certain dollar amount tagged into your bank account, or that you have to have the right gender or the right amount of success in your career to be of value. Every culture has a hero system in which there's merit that is earned and then credit's given. But in Jesus Christ, we are free. And when you say, no longer am I going to work, I'm going to cease. Not necessarily because all of my work is done, but because I'm going to celebrate the freedom that I've been given in God. Then we're remembering how we are made. The second reason that rest is important is that it centers us on God. I'm going to be honest, whenever I planned out this series last year and I started putting down the topics and the days and looking at the schedule, I knew that this week was Super Bowl Sunday. And this is a leisurely day for a lot of us. For some of us that care about sports, it's a day where we want to take a rest from the things that we do regularly. And my intention in planning it here was to remind us that we need to have leisure. That we need to just, we don't need to work 24/7, but we need to have rest. But as I was studying and praying and meditating on this, I realized that for some of us, our leisure becomes our slave. That the reason that we are a slave to our job is not because they tell us, but because we want to have this quality of leisure. Or we sign our children up in all kinds of activities, and our leisure is what then schedules all of our activities throughout the week. And we become a slave to our leisure. But I want to remind you what the command was in Exodus chapter 20. He said that this was to be a Sabbath. The seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord. That in your rest, it is supposed to be done unto the Lord. That the Sabbath, in some way, is about the relationship between you and God. And just because you are taking a rest, just because you are having a Sabbath, doesn't mean that it's done unto the Lord. Because you can go out on a date with somebody and not actually be there with them. You can go and be in the movie theater with somebody and not actually be about building a relationship with them. But our rest, our Sabbath, is to be done unto the Lord. It is centering God in our life. Have you ever noticed the rhythm that exists in the story of creation? In the first telling in Genesis chapter 1, you have the light and dark being created, and then at the conclusion of that day, you have this, there was evening and there was morning, day 1. And then day 2 is told, and you have there was evening and there was morning, day 2. And then evening and morning, day 3. Evening and morning, day 4. Evening and morning, day 5. Evening and morning, day 6. And it seems backwards, doesn't it? Because we reckon time, it starts in the morning. That at 12 o'clock midnight, that ushers in a new day, and we call call that morning. It may be the early hours of the morning, but we call that morning because our day begins with work. But God is telling a different story, a new story that has a rhythm to it of rest and work. That work flows out of rest. There's always this rhythm of work, of rest and work, rest and work, rest and work. And then there's this extended day of rest. Eugene Peterson says that observing the Sabbath, that it puts us in the rhythm of God. Now I know that many of us, you've grown up Church of Christ, and so we don't have rhythm. But there is a rhythm to life. There is a rhythm in which God lives. And life flows better for us whenever we live in that rhythm. The rhythm of God. I have a tooth that is chipped in one of my front teeth. I chipped it whenever I was probably about 10 years old. I got injured by a quarter horse. Took my younger sister on a ride, and I was in front of that quarter horse, and I was, the horses, they kind of have a rhythm to their walk, a cadence, and I was kind of bobbing up and down in that rhythm, and one of us got out of rhythm, and I got headbutted by this quarter horse. And after the ride was over, I took my sister off and went and found my mom in the grocery store and told her that I chipped my tooth. And I was out of rhythm with something that did not change. See, that horse has a rhythm, and it's constant. It doesn't change. But because I got out of step with that rhythm, I was injured. Damage was done to me. And that's what happens when we persistently ignore rest. Yeah, you can take some energy drink and you can get through the day. You can take a 20-minute nap and it may give you enough energy to get through another week until you can crash. But what damage gets done is that over time, you move God out of the center of your world. And you start to think that everything's dependent upon you. See, that's what's so hard about taking a rest. And I get it. I have that struggle. It is so hard for me to take a break and for me to not be here on a Sunday. Because in my mind, this church is going to fall apart if I'm not here. And how arrogant of me to think that God is not going to be able to speak to you if I'm not here. How arrogant of me to think that this world is going to fall apart if I take a break. But what is happening is I've moved God out because I've moved out of God's rhythm. And it's no different for you. In Savannah, Missouri, the public library decided to open on Sundays. It was a change for them. And as a result, Connie Rem, who had been employed at the library for 12 years, was facing a dilemma. Does she now start to skip going to church, or does she risk losing her job? And she made a commitment that she was not going to stop going to church, and she was fired. She decided to sue because of discrimination based on religion. And whenever it became apparent that she had a strong case, the library offered a financial settlement. But the attorney said that what was strange about this case was that Connie was not interested in the finances, that she didn't want a financial payday. She just simply wanted her job back. So 3 years after her termination, she was given her job back. She was quoted as saying that it's not a matter of displaying the 10 Commandments. It's about being able to live the 10 Commandments. And that's what my employer was asking me not to do. And I know that from time to time we get in uproar and it goes viral on Facebook and other social media that there's some courthouse that's kicking the 10 Commandments out of the courthouse. And my issue is not so much that we're kicking the 10 Commandments out, but that we are not living the 10 Commandments. And that's what I'm calling us to do. Is to stop getting so upset that the laws of God are not displayed in our world, but to be upset that we are not ourselves living how we are made. Because you see, you and I, we're made with a rhythm. And whenever we get tired, that need to go to sleep, that need to sit down and get off our feet for a moment is a reminder that we are made to rest. Because we are made as image bearers of one who rests. Jesus came. You know what he preached? He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." So this morning, if you are weary, if you are tired, come to Jesus. We're going to stand and sing another song of worship. There will be some at the front and someone else in the back. If we can help you find that rest by coming to Jesus, then please do so this morning as we stand to worship.